Jake Cole had never wanted to be a hero. He had joined Earth's Diplomatic Security Corps because the pay was decent and the work was steady. For 3 years, he had served aboard the Meridian, a large diplomatic vessel that carried human ambassadors to distant stars. His job was simple: stand in corners, watch for trouble, and stay out of the way. He was good at being invisible. The Meridian was not a warship. It was a floating palace designed to impress alien species with humanity's culture and peaceful intentions. Jake had seen dozens of first contact missions from the background. He had watched ambassadors shake hands with beings made of living crystal. He had guarded doorways while diplomats negotiated trade deals with species who communicated through color and light. But he had never been important. He was just another face in a uniform. That changed when the ship received orders to travel to Prime. The Dominion was one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their technology was thousands of years more advanced than anything humans had built, and they did not think much of humanity at all. To the humans were newcomers, children who had just learned to walk among the stars. They had been traveling between galaxies when humans were still living in caves on Earth. They tolerated humanity's existence, but they did not respect it. Every interaction between the two species had been filled with polite condescension. They smiled and nodded and treated human diplomats like amusing pets who had learned a few clever tricks. But now, for reasons no one fully understood, they had invited humanity to formal alliance talks. It was the biggest diplomatic opportunity in human history. If Earth could secure a real partnership with the Dominion, it would change everything. Humanity would have access to technology, protection, and trade routes that would advance their civilization by centuries. The pressure on the Meridian crew was enormous. Everyone had been briefed dozens of times. Every word, every gesture, every uniform had been analyzed and approved. Nothing could go wrong. Jake listened to the briefings with half an ear. His assignment was simple: perimeter security during the welcoming ceremony. He would stand at the edge of the throne chamber and watch the crowd. If he did his job correctly, no one would even know he was there. The Meridian arrived at Prime on a clear morning by ship time. Jake stood at a viewport and watched the planet grow larger. It was beautiful in a strange way. The surface was covered in vast forests of silver trees and oceans that shimmered with purple light. The cities were built into massive crystalline towers that seemed to grow from the ground like natural formations. Everything about the world looked ancient and perfect. The shuttle ride down to the surface was quiet. Ambassador Hayes sat in the front with her senior staff, reviewing notes and practicing greetings in the language. Jake sat in the back with the other security officers. No one spoke to him. He was used to that. The throne chamber of the High Court was larger than any building Jake had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above. The walls were lined with galleries where hundreds of nobles watched the proceedings with cold, silver eyes. The floor was polished stone that reflected light like a mirror. Every sound echoed. Jake took his position near one of the side entrances and made himself small. He scanned the room slowly, noting exits, counting guards, watching the crowd. It was what he had been trained to do. Most of it was routine. The guards were tall and elegant, dressed in armor that looked like sculpted glass. They moved with perfect precision. Jake felt clumsy and small by comparison. The ceremony began with music. Instruments made sounds that were almost too beautiful to bear. The notes seemed to hang in the air like visible things. Then the announcements started. Names and titles were called out in the language. Nobles bowed. Diplomats exchanged formal greetings. Jake barely paid attention. He was watching a servant near the far wall. The servant was dressed in simple robes like all the others, but something about the way the figure moved caught Jake's eye. The steps were too quick. The posture was too tense. Everyone else in the room was relaxed and confident. This servant looked like a coiled spring. Jake shifted his weight slightly. He told himself he was being paranoid. The security was legendary. No one could sneak a weapon into the throne chamber. The servant was probably just nervous about spilling a drink in front of royalty. But Jake kept watching anyway. Princess entered the chamber, and the crowd fell silent. She was the third daughter of Archon, the ruler of the entire Dominion. Even among she was considered remarkably beautiful. Her skin was pale silver, and her eyes were like polished gems. She moved with a grace that made every human in the room look awkward by comparison. The princess approached Ambassador Hayes to deliver the formal welcome. Jake saw her smile. It was a cold smile, polite but distant. She did not think humans were worthy of real warmth. Jake had seen that look 100 times from 100 alien species. He was used to it. Then he saw the servant move. The figure pushed through the crowd with sudden speed. A hand reached into the ceremonial robes and pulled out something that glowed with orange light. Jake did not know what the weapon was called. He did not know how it worked, but he knew what it was pointed at. Princess had her back turned. She did not see the danger. The guards were too far away. The weapon was already charging. Jake did not think. His body simply moved. He pushed off from the wall and ran. People shouted. Someone grabbed at his arm, but he twisted free. The distance between him and the princess seemed to stretch forever. Time slowed down. He saw the assassin's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the weapon glow brighter. He saw begin to turn, confusion crossing her perfect face. Jake threw himself forward. His shoulder hit the princess and knocked her aside, and then the world turned to fire. The blast hit him in the chest. For one terrible moment, Jake felt everything. He felt his uniform burn away. He felt his skin blister and char. He felt the heat reach down into his bones. The pain was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Then the floor came up to meet him, and everything went dark. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was screaming. He hoped it was not the princess. He hoped she was safe. That was all that mattered. The throne chamber erupted into chaos. Guards swarmed toward the assassin with weapons drawn. Nobles screamed and fled in every direction. The beautiful music stopped, replaced by shouts and the sound of running feet on stone. Princess lay on the floor where the human had knocked her. For a moment, she could not understand what had happened. 1 second she had been delivering a formal greeting. The next, something had struck her from behind and thrown her to the ground. She looked up and saw smoke rising from a body that lay motionless beside her. The human, the small, unremarkable human who had been standing in the corner. He had put himself between her and death. Pushed herself to her knees and stared at him. His chest was a ruin of burned flesh and melted fabric. The smell of cooked meat filled the air. She had seen death before. She knew what a killing wound looked like. By every measure she understood, this human should already be gone. But his chest was still moving. Barely, slowly, he was breathing. "Physicians," she shouted. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Bring physicians now." The guards had already captured the assassin. They held the struggling figure down while others searched for additional threats, but did not care about that. She could not look away from the human at her feet. Blood was pooling beneath him. Human blood was red, she remembered, such a strange color. It looked like wine spreading across the polished floor. His eyes were closed and his face was twisted in pain even though he was unconscious. His hands were curled into fists at his sides. The royal physicians arrived within moments. They were the best the Dominion had to offer, trained for thousands of years in the art of healing. They looked at the human and exchanged glances that understood immediately. They did not expect him to survive. "Do everything you can," commanded, "whatever it takes." One of the physicians hesitated. "Your Highness, this is a human. Our techniques may not work on their physiology, and the damage is severe. It would perhaps be kinder to let him pass peacefully." "He saved my life," said. Her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "You will save his. That is not a request." The physicians went to work. They brought a hovering medical platform and carefully lifted the human onto it. Strange machines surrounded him, pumping fluids into his body and sealing his wounds with glowing purple substances. Walked alongside the platform as they carried him toward the Royal Medical Wing. Ambassador Hayes tried to intercept them. The human diplomat's face was pale with shock. "Your Highness, please, let me take him back to our ship. We have human doctors who know how to treat him." Shook her head. "Your doctors do not have our technology. We have a better chance of saving him here." She paused and looked at the ambassador. "This man is under my protection now. I will not let him die." The medical wing was a place of quiet efficiency. Technology hummed and glowed as the physicians worked. They had to guess at many things because human biology was so different from their own. They tested his blood, scanned his organs, and struggled to understand how his body functioned. What they found amazed them. The human should have died instantly. The weapon that struck him was designed to kill, who were far more resilient than humans. A direct hit to the chest should have stopped his heart immediately. But somehow, against all logic, his heart was still beating. The physicians gathered around their displays and spoke in hushed voices. They had studied human biology before, but only in an academic sense. Humans were considered too primitive to be interesting, but this human was showing them something they had never expected. His body was fighting. Every cell, every tissue, every organ was working desperately to keep him alive. His immune system was responding to damage in ways the physicians had never seen. His blood was clotting faster than it should. His heart was adjusting its rhythm to compensate for the trauma. It was as if his entire body had declared war on death itself. "This is impossible," one physician said. "His species has no natural regeneration abilities. They have no enhanced healing factors. They are, by all measurements, fragile creatures. How is he still alive?" Another physician studied the readings carefully. "I believe it is willpower. Humans have unusually strong connections between their minds and bodies. He is refusing to die." "That is not scientific." "No, but it is remarkable." They worked through the night. They repaired what they could and supported what they could not repair. They wrapped his chest in biosynthetic tissue that would help his body heal. They filled his veins with medications that would fight infection and reduce pain. And through it all, the human kept breathing. News of what had happened spread quickly through the palace. By morning, everyone knew that a human security officer had thrown himself in front of an assassin's blast to save Princess. The story seemed impossible. Humans were weak and selfish. Everyone knew that. They were primitive creatures who cared only about themselves. Why would one of them sacrifice his life for royalty? Archon himself came to the medical wing to see the human. He stood over the bed in silence for a long time, studying the unconscious figure. The human looked so small and fragile lying there. His skin was pale, and dark circles had formed under his eyes. Machines beeped and hummed around him, keeping him alive. "Will he survive?" the Archon asked. The chief physician bowed low. "We do not know, Your Majesty. By all rights he should already be dead, but he continues to fight. We have done everything we can. The rest is up to him." The Archon nodded slowly. "Keep me informed of any changes. This human has earned our attention." Stayed by the human's bed as much as her duties allowed. She did not know why. She owed him her life, yes, but that did not explain the strange feeling in her chest when she looked at him. She had never met a creature like this before, someone who would give everything for a stranger. On the second night, his fever spiked dangerously high. The physicians worked frantically to bring it down. Watched from the corner of the room, her hands clasped tightly together. She found herself whispering words she had not spoken since childhood, prayers to ancient gods that her people no longer. On the third day, his vital signs stabilized. The physicians announced that he would live. And on the third evening, Jake Cole opened his eyes. Jake opened his eyes to a ceiling made of light. Soft purple and blue colors swirled above him like the surface of a calm ocean. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then the pain hit him, and he knew he was very much awake. His chest felt like someone had poured fire into it. Every breath hurt. Every small movement sent waves of agony through his body. He tried to lift his head, but the effort was too much. He let it fall back against the pillow and stared at the strange ceiling. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was running toward the princess. Then heat and light and pain beyond anything he had ever felt. After that, nothing. A soft voice spoke from somewhere nearby. "You are awake." Jake turned his head slowly. The movement cost him dearly, but he needed to see who was speaking. Princess stood at the foot of his bed. She looked different than he remembered from the throne chamber. She was still beautiful, still elegant, but there was something in her silver eyes that had not been there before. She looked at him the way one might look at a puzzle that had suddenly grown new pieces. "Where am I?" Jake's voice came out as a rough whisper. His throat was dry and scratchy. "The Royal Medical Wing said, 'You have been unconscious for 3 days. Our physicians did not expect you to survive.'" 3 days. Jake tried to process that information. 3 days of his life just gone. He wondered if anyone had contacted his family back on Earth. His mother would be worried sick. "The assassin," he said, "did you catch them?" Tilted her head slightly. Of all the questions he could have asked, that was not the one she expected. "Yes, he has been captured and is awaiting trial. He was part of a faction that opposes any alliance with your species." Jake nodded. That made sense. There were always people who did not want peace. He had seen it 100 times on Earth. He should not be surprised to find it among the stars as well. "Good," he said simply. Then he closed his eyes because even that short conversation had exhausted him. When he opened them again, the princess was sitting in a chair beside his bed. She had a data tablet in her hands, but she was not looking at it. She was looking at him. "You should rest," she said. "I have been resting for 3 days." "You were dying for 3 days. That is not the same thing." Jake almost smiled at that. It hurt too much to actually do it, but he felt the impulse. Fair point. A long silence stretched between them. The machines around his bed hummed quietly, doing whatever alien machines did to keep humans alive. Jake could feel strange substances moving through his veins, tingling and burning in equal measure. Finally spoke again. "Why did you do it?" Jake blinked at her. "Do what?" "Save me." Her voice was careful, controlled. But underneath the calm surface, Jake heard something else. Confusion, maybe even frustration. "You did not know me. You had never spoken to me. I am not even a member of your species. And yet you threw away your life to protect mine. Why?" It was a simple question. Jake searched for a simple answer. "You were in danger," he said. "I could help, so I did." Shook her head slowly. "That is not an answer. That is an explanation of what happened, not why." Jake thought about it. His mind was foggy from medication and pain, but he tried to find the words she was looking for. "Where I come from, you do not stand by while someone innocent is about to die. Not if you can do something about it. It does not matter who they are or where they come from. A life is a life. Even if protecting that life costs you your own." Even then, stared at him for a long moment. Her expression was impossible to read. Jake had no idea what she was thinking, and he was too tired to try to figure it out. "My people do not think that way," she finally said. "Every action we take is weighed against personal gain, political advantage, familial duty. We do not sacrifice without calculation. The idea of giving your life for a stranger is," she paused, searching for the right word, "alien to us." Jake managed a weak shrug. It hurt. "I guess we are pretty alien then." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. It was gone so quickly that Jake was not sure he had really seen it. "Yes, you are." She stood up and set her data tablet aside. "The Archon has summoned you to appear before the High Court. When you are well enough to move, you will be brought before the entire Dominion to answer questions about what you did and why. Jake felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with his injuries. That sounds serious. It is. No human has ever stood where you will stand. The most powerful figures in our civilization will be watching. Every noble, every advisor, every military commander. They will all want to understand you. Understand me. You have done something impossible, Jake Cole. You have made the curious about humanity. Move toward the door. Rest now. Recover your strength. You will need it. She was almost gone when Jake called out to her, "Your Highness." She stopped and looked back. "Thank you," he said, "for saving my life." His expression softened just slightly. "You saved mine first. We are even." Then she was gone, and Jake was alone with his thoughts and his pain and the strange glowing ceiling above him. He lay there for a long time, thinking about what she had said. The High Court, the entire Dominion, every powerful figure in an ancient alien civilization, all wanting to understand why a simple human had done what he did. Jake had no idea what he was going to tell them. He had acted on instinct, not philosophy. He had not been thinking about politics or diplomacy or the future of human-alien relations. He had just seen someone in danger and moved to help. How could he explain that to beings who calculated every action like a chess move? How could he make them understand something that he did not fully understand himself? He supposed he would figure it out when the time came. For now, all he could do was heal. All he could do was rest. All he could do was prepare himself for the most important moment of his life. No pressure. Jake closed his eyes and let the darkness take him again. This time, at least, it was the darkness of sleep rather than death. He would take that as a victory. The day of the summons arrived too quickly. Jake still could not walk on his own. The physician said he was healing remarkably fast for a human, but remarkably fast still meant slowly by standards. They fitted him with a hovering medical platform that would carry him into the throne chamber. He felt ridiculous lying there like an invalid on display, but there was no other choice. Ambassador Hayes visited him before the ceremony. She looked nervous, which made Jake feel nervous too. In all his years serving aboard the Meridian, he had never seen the ambassador look anything but confident. "This is unprecedented," she said. "No human has ever addressed the High Court directly. Whatever you say in there could shape relations between our species for generations." "No pressure then," Jake said weakly. Hayes did not laugh. "I am serious, Jake. The Archon is going to ask you questions. Answer honestly but carefully. Do not promise anything on behalf of Earth. Do not make any claims about humanity that we cannot support. And whatever you do, do not offend them." Jake nodded. His head was spinning from medication and anxiety. "Just be honest and do not mess up. Got it?" Hayes sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved the princess's life. That counts for something. Just remember that they are watching you, but they are also watching humanity through you. Everything you do reflects on all of us." That thought did not make Jake feel any better. The throne chamber looked different than Jake remembered. Last time, he had seen it from the edges as a background figure. Now, as his medical platform floated through the massive doors, he saw it from the center, and it was terrifying. Hundreds filled the tiered galleries that rose on all sides. Their silver eyes followed his platform as it moved toward the throne. The silence was complete. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed in the enormous space. Jake felt incredibly small and incredibly exposed. At the far end of the chamber, Archon sat on a throne of crystalline light. He was ancient even by standards, his silver skin marked with patterns that indicated centuries of life. His eyes were cold and sharp as knives. To his right stood Princess, her face carefully blank. The platform stopped a respectful distance from the throne. Jake tried to sit up, but his chest screamed in protest. He settled for lifting his head as high as he could manage. The Archon spoke. His voice filled the chamber like thunder, deep and resonant and impossible to ignore. Human, you stand before the high court of the Dominion. Do you understand the honor that has been granted to you? I do, Your Majesty. Jake's voice sounded thin and weak compared to the Archon's. He hated that, but there was nothing he could do about it. 3 days ago, an assassin attempted to take the life of my daughter. You intercepted the killing blow with your own body. The Archon paused. The weapon used was designed to kill warriors. You are not. You are not a warrior. By every calculation, you should be dead. I have been told that several times, Your Majesty. A murmur ran through the galleries. The Archon's expression did not change. We have examined the recordings of the incident. We have analyzed your actions from every angle. We cannot find any logical explanation for what you did. Jake waited. He sensed that the real questions were coming. Why did you save my daughter? The Archon demanded. Was it a political calculation? Did your government order you to protect her at any cost? What does humanity expect in return for this sacrifice? Jake took a deep breath. It hurt, but he forced himself to speak clearly. No one ordered me to do anything, Your Majesty. I did not think about politics or rewards. I saw someone in danger and I acted. That is not an answer. The Archon's voice hardened. Every action has a motivation. Every sacrifice has a price. What do you want from us? Nothing. The word hung in the air. The galleries went completely silent. Even the Archon seemed taken aback. Nothing, he repeated. Jake shook his head. I do not want anything. Where I come from, you do not stand by while an innocent person is about to die. You help them. You do what you can, not because you expect something in return, but because it is the right thing to do. And if helping them costs you your own life, then at least you did something. At least you tried. Jake met the Archon's gaze as steadily as he could. Humans are not brave because we are strong. We know we are fragile. We know we can die easily. But we choose to act anyway. Not because we have calculated the odds, but because we could not live with ourselves if we did not. The silence stretched on. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes boring into him. He had no idea if his words were having any effect or if he had just sealed his fate. Then Princess moved. She walked down from her place beside the throne. Her steps were slow and deliberate, her silver robes flowing behind her like water. Every eye in the chamber followed her. She stopped in front of Jake's platform and looked down at him with an expression he could not read. Then she bowed. It was not a small bow. It was not a polite nod between equals. She bent nearly in half, lowering her head until her silver hair brushed the floor. Jake heard gasps from the galleries. He heard whispers of shock and disbelief. This is the deepest bow of our people, said, her voice carrying through the chamber. It signifies a debt that can never be fully repaid. I give it now, before the entire Dominion, to this human who saved my life without asking for anything in return. She straightened and turned to face her father. Jake Cole has shown us something today. He has shown us that courage does not require calculation. That sacrifice does not require reward. These are qualities we believed existed only in the ancient warriors of our history. We were wrong. The Archon stared at his daughter for a long moment. Then he turned his gaze back to Jake. Something had changed in his eyes. The coldness was still there, but beneath it was something else. Interest, maybe even respect. Human, the Archon said slowly, you have given us much to consider. Your species is young and weak by our standards, but perhaps there are other forms of strength that we have failed to recognize. He rose from his throne. The entire court rose with him. This audience is concluded. The human will be returned to the medical wing to continue his recovery. Further decisions will be announced in due time. As the platform carried Jake away, he caught Sci's eye one last time. She gave him the smallest of nods. He had survived. The weeks that followed Jake's appearance before the High Court were unlike anything humanity had experienced. News of what had happened spread through the Dominion like fire through dry grass. A human, one of those primitive, short-lived creatures from a backwater world, had saved a princess of the royal blood and asked for nothing in return. It was the only thing anyone talked about. Jake knew none of this at first. He spent most of his time in the medical wing, slowly healing under the care of physicians who had become genuinely invested in his recovery. They visited him more often than necessary, asking questions about human biology, running tests, taking notes. He had become their most interesting patient in centuries. Princess visited him too, almost every day. Their conversation started awkwardly. She would arrive with formal questions about human culture and customs, treating each visit like a research project. But over time, the formality faded. She began to stay longer. She began to ask about his life, his family, his childhood on Earth. And Jake found himself telling her things he had never told anyone. He told her about growing up poor in a small town where nothing ever happened. He told her about joining the military because it was the only way to see the world. He told her about transferring to the diplomatic corps because he was tired of fighting and wanted to believe that peace was possible. He told her about the crushing loneliness of spending years in space, surrounded by people who saw him as nothing more than a uniform. Listened to everything with those strange silver eyes that seemed to see right through him. And sometimes, when he finished speaking, she would tell him things about herself too. She told him about being born into a family where love was calculated by political value. She told him about being raised to be a symbol rather than a person. She told him about the pressure of representing an ancient civilization to younger species who would never see her as anything but cold and distant. She told him that she had never met anyone who treated her like a normal being instead of a princess. "You do not bow when you speak to me," she observed one evening. "Every other creature I have ever met bows." Jake shrugged. It still hurt a little, but less than before. "I cannot bow from this bed, and anyway, you asked me not to treat you differently." No one has ever listened before. Their conversations became the highlight of Jake's days. He found himself watching the door, waiting for her to appear. He found himself thinking about her when she was not there. It was a dangerous feeling, and he knew it. She was alien royalty, and he was nobody. Whatever was growing between them could never lead anywhere. But he could not help how he felt. Meanwhile, the political situation was shifting in ways Jake did not fully understand. Ambassador Hayes briefed him when she could, explaining that the assassination attempt had exposed deep divisions within the Dominion. The faction that had tried to kill believed that humanity was a threat to the natural order. They wanted to keep younger species weak and dependent, but Jake's actions had made that position harder to defend. "You embarrassed them," Hayes explained. "They claimed humans were selfish and primitive. You proved them wrong in front of the entire court. The moderate faction is using your story to push for real cooperation with Earth." "I did not mean to cause a political crisis," Jake said. Hayes smiled for the first time since the incident. "Sometimes the best things happen by accident." The Archon made his decision 6 weeks after Jake's appearance before the High Court. It was announced in a formal ceremony broadcast across the entire Dominion. Earth was no longer classified as a provisional contact species. By unanimous vote of the High Court, humanity had been elevated to full diplomatic standing within the Dominion. It was the biggest achievement in human history. Full standing meant access to technology, trade routes, and protection that would advance Earth's civilization by centuries. It meant that humans would finally be treated as equals by one of the oldest powers in the galaxy. And it had all started with one moment of instinct in a throne chamber. Jake watched the announcement from his bed in the medical wing. When it ended, he turned to find standing in the doorway. "You did this," she said. "You changed everything." Jake shook his head. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No." She walked to his bedside and looked down at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. That is what makes your species special. You believe that anyone would do what you did. You believe that courage and sacrifice are normal. They are not. But perhaps, if we spend enough time with humans, we might learn to see them that way. The day Jake was finally cleared to leave the medical wing, a small ceremony was held in his honor. The Archon himself presented him with a Medal of the Dominion, the highest honor a non could receive. Ambassador Hayes pinned an Earth commendation to his chest right beside it. Jake stood stiffly through the whole thing, uncomfortable with the attention. He had never wanted to be a hero. He still did not think of himself as one. He had just been in the right place at the right time and done what felt right. The Meridian departed from Prime on a bright morning. Jake stood at a viewport and watched the silver forests and purple oceans shrink into the distance. He thought about everything that had happened and everyone he was leaving behind. A message arrived as the ship entered hyperspace. It was from, "I hope we will meet again, Jake Cole. There is more I want to learn about humans. There is more I want to learn about you." Jake read the message 3 times. Then he saved it carefully and turned to look at the stars streaming past the viewport. Some of the crew joked that he had single-handedly advanced human-alien relations by 100 years. Jake just shrugged and said what he always said. "I was in the right place at the right time. Anyone would have done the same." But deep down, he knew that was not entirely true. Something had changed in that throne chamber. Something had changed in him. And something had changed between him and a princess from the stars who had bowed before her entire civilization to honor a man who had expected nothing. The future was uncertain. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. But for the first time in his life, Jake Cole felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And somewhere, on a world of silver trees and crystalline towers, watched the stars and thought about a human who had taught her that courage did not require calculation. She smiled just a little and waited for the day they would meet again.